I'm Jeff Oliverio, and let's queer up the USA View. Pennsylvania ends HIV-specific criminal sentencing enhancements with new law. Pennsylvania has eliminated HIV-specific criminal sentencing enhancements, removing provisions that impose harsher penalties on people living with HIV for certain offenses. Governor Josh Shapiro signed Senate Bill 45 as part of a broader package of legislation. Previously, people charged with prostitution-related offenses could face felony charges and up to 7 years in prison if they were HIV positive, even when the underlying offense was typically a misdemeanor. Advocates say the state change brings state law in line with current medical science and helps reduce HIV-related stigma. Lawyer Ronda Goldfein told the Pennsylvania Capital Star, quote, "Criminal penalties for living with HIV have never served an effective law enforcement purpose. No credible research has ever linked penalties with reduction in HIV transmission," end quote. Dr. Kostman also criticized HIV criminalization, saying, quote, "We know today that when people living with HIV are taking medications and have an undetectable level of virus in their blood, they can't transmit the virus to other people. Therefore, there's no scientific basis for criminalizing HIV," end quote. According to the movement Advancement Project, 26 states still have laws criminalizing HIV transmission, perceived exposure, or HIV-specific sentencing enhancements, while 4 states may also require sex offender registration in certain cases. I think it's just enlightening to have these stories because, again, to hear that more than half of our states still have these laws on the books, I think to the greater community outside of our community would most likely be shocked by it, considering, again, there's no scientific evidence that would, lead to these type of criminalization, but it takes leaders. Thank you to Josh Shapiro and the Senate in Pennsylvania for getting this bill passed. I do hope more states will review this, especially in light of, how outdated this is. I mean, I remember when I learned when I came out that I was no longer able to give blood at the time. And as a previously not out person, I didn't know anything about that. And it kind of shocked me. And, my dad is frequently involved in blood drives and called me one day to tell me, I'm doing a blood drive, and was going on about it. And then he said, you should go give blood. And I said, well, actually, I can't give blood, Dad. And he was like, wow, why can't you give blood? He couldn't understand it. And I told him, and he, as a straight man, said, but they test all the blood. And I said, exactly. I said, it's just discrimination. It is outdated. And so these laws, across the spectrum live on the books in many states, municipalities, communities, and people don't know about it. So
I remember when this first happened and they first started doing these laws against people giving blood, and also the criminalization for having sex if you're HIV positive. And you've got to say, to your point, which was my point, is they're going to test it anyway.
Yeah.
And you're not criminalizing prostitution, where they could be passing on all kinds of diseases, but that's not a criminal offense for people that actually spend their time on the streets working. So it has been hypocrisy from the beginning. I have a friend that actually does the Blood Project. His name is Eagles. I think Jordan Eagles out of New York. And it's like a 8-foot tall square block that travels around the country, and it has blood of people of LGBT famous people that cannot give blood, and it emphasizes of how many people could be saved by the blood that's not being able to be used, because not everybody's HIV positive just because you're LGBTQ. It's not one and the same, and it is a discriminatory practice.
It's meant to be stigmatizing. And it's just othering LGBTQ people. That's what it's always been, because not only did they test it, but if it tested positive, they retested it. You can get, they just wanted. It was always super safe, super to make sure, and then they just destroy it if it's no good. They're never going to pass it on. And so, but this is about making LGBTQ dangerous, monstrous, scary, unsafe. That's the agenda behind it. We don't criminalize other diseases, and or even make you impossible to get. Like, they don't ask you if you have sickle cell anemia. They don't ask you if you've had hepatitis, or maybe they do. But I mean, but that's because you've had a thing, not just because you happen to be, but not just because you happen to be a certain kind of person. If you've had these diseases, but they don't. So yeah, it was always about that. and I guess I should say, I don't think I've said anything bishopy tonight. I should say something bishopy, I guess. And that is that healing, the ministry of presence and the ministry of healing, that's core to religious movements, particularly the Christian movement. And so a lot of these fear-based and angry and hateful and violent and discriminatory, they are promoted by Christians, and who claim to follow the example, the stories of life of someone who was executed by the state, somebody whose ministry was touching the untouchable and loving the unlovable. And so it makes me angry that all of this hate is generated in the name of religion, but it's the religion that is based on a person who never found someone he thought was untouchable.
Yeah. Well, Pennsylvania is fortunate to have a governor like Josh Shapiro. No relation.
You wish.
Well, there is no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire world. Support our LGBTQ stories by sharing them and subscribing to Queer News Tonight.